Howdy, all you delicious people. Here today, talk about comic books. Where to start, what to collect. So, firstly, I'd have to go on and state to you that I'm to not only go on and talk about the big two, which is Marvel and DC, but then also I'm going to be talking about independent books like Image or Vault or other kind of stuff, Boom Studios, a number of just kind of content that maybe will get your fancy, or maybe have you go on and just be like, man, I spent how many minutes just trying to figure out an answer for this possible question through what this guy has stated, and I still have gotten nothing. That also could be the answer which that you may end up being uh, involved in, because you are to just have very much a certain specific palette of tastes when it comes down to comic book reading. That's you, and by golly, like, if you were to not just be a person that is to just make your way into a comic book store or an online Amazons or eBays to figure that freaking answer out, then by golly, I don't think I can be able to figure that out for you also. At some gosh darn point, where you should start, what to collect for you. Because really, in all honesty, not every story is to be a winner. There is no wrong answer also with starting a comic book collection. The only wrong answer would be if you are just consistently buying books and you don't have the financial ability to get all of those set books. Or you are to be a person that goes on and just buys mystery boxes. I have no clue what I'm getting. I'm just buying all these mystery boxes because I know nothing about comic books. More than likely, whatever you're buying in a comic book mystery box, you're probably not going to be able to return what you are to have purchased from out of them. When eventually it comes down to decades somewhere down the line, and you are to be realizing that, like, well, maybe I should go on and see if these books are to give me some kind of riches. They will not. More than likely, probably what you would purchase for them decades later, they will probably still be at that same price, if not less, because logically they're probably going to go on and be no key issues of Fantastic Four or X Force, X Factor, early years of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which no one cared about, or some other New Mutants something books that have dick worth of no value. So, with that said, there are certain people that are going to be certain kinds of comic book collectors. There's going to be some people that are to go on and just like a comic book for its visual appeal. Maybe you are to just be collecting a comic book because you like a comic book cover, or you are to go on and are to just read the comic books. And I'm hoping I can go on and kind of persuade the readers to check out some of these titles here. Who knows? But then again, there could also be people that are just here to collect the zeros and ones and key issues, and could be strategically looking into what books that they should go on and get into, which logically, I don't know if I'm going to be that kind of person exactly for you, because really I feel that that kind of answer is a much easier one that I'm probably going to go on and give. Uh, because, like, I think there are certain specific Marvel or DC characters that I think will always have a value compared to so many others. And you could logically figure that out by going on and checking out like top 50 Marvel or DC characters, and then just being like, well, uh, like, that must be the pot of gold character right there. So I should probably just be collecting everything from those certain handful of characters because they are probably to be the most popular. But anyways, depending on if they are to have eschewed or tampered with that whole list, we'll never know, but it is what it is either way. So, after saying all of that, getting that out of the way, now let's state the words modern comic books. The very new or newer books that are going on in the big two, DC and Marvel. I am to go on and tell you, if you want me to give you a pull list of the newer issues in modern books of DC and Marvel, I would go on and state that a lot of those stories, for the most point, are seemingly mostly trash or garbage. Legitimately. There are also a lot of them very limited runs, it seems. And the only thing that struck out in my eyes to be like, ooh, I liked these stories, were honestly kind of stuff that was going on with modern Ghost Rider, or I didn't like that Blade had the Blood Hunt story, and I think there are a lot of people that are to go on and to have liked what was going on with characters like Doctor Strange, or there every once in a while would be like some kind of interesting things going on with Deadpool, or really anything else that is to try to avoid to not really get into that whole like X-Men thing, because there's a whole huge event going on with X-Men that I could not give a rip about. And when I'm to kind of read off the stories of what was going on with that X-Men story, I didn't give a care in the world, in all honesty. I would have rather read an Inhuman book than than read modern X-Men event thing. I could not give a care in the world. So, and then we have DC. DC at this point should stop calling itself Detective Comics and should just be calling itself Rinse and Frickin' Repeat. Oh my god. The Justice League stories alone that I've heard that is going on right now just baffles me. Because I'm like, hey, is the Justice League going to finally face off against like Mad Hatter or Anarchy or just an actually interesting character for frickin' once? But no. We go on and we have the Justice League facing off against Brainiac. Sure, it's a gender swapping Brainiac, but it's Brainiac nonetheless. Great! And then we also have the Justice League soon facing off against Darkseid. Wow! People actually pay money for these fights that have happened just over and over and over again. How is this a modern book? I don't know how many times I could count on two hands how many times Justice League have faced off against Brainiac or Darkseid separately. Case by case basis on just two hands. Just, oh my god. Every time there's a reboot, we should probably get in Darkseid with that Justice League. God, look at the beginning of New 52, and you'll see that the Justice League had faced off against Darkseid. And they're honestly telling you that, like, oh yeah, we're not going to go on and we're not going to give you a reboot here. We're just going to kind of give you something different. No, you're not giving us anything goddamn different. You're giving us the freaking same. Same old, same old. How many times are you going to go on and kill off the Fantastic Four, make them disappear? Has ever there been a time where X Factor or X Force or some other X-Men book beyond just straight up X-Men have any value? Even like X-Men, I think, is losing value with bizarrely how many times you have to visually reinvent that entire team. And I'm like, what the heck are these visuals? What is going on here? Why does Cyclops always have to look the freaking weirdest out of that whole entire goddamn group? It looks just ridiculous at this point. However, they're going on to redesigning the X-Men. God, you might as well just toss them into like some black leather and call it a day. Oh my god. Um, just make them look like Neo from the Matrix, if anything. God dang it. Like how the first movie just made them look. Good grief. At least a lot of the same color scheme for once. Man. Huh. But yeah, modern books, like, logically for how, like, they're to, it seemingly state that they're going to have a limited run for everything, makes me want to go on and just be like, okay, well, I'm limitly interested. And I would rather go on and finally check out stuff that I had heard really good things about. Um, and there have been a number of people that have all talked about this one book instead of just going on and just going into the new fresh product. So that's my own biased opinion, and maybe that is to be your biased opinion, or maybe it's not. But either way, I'm here to say here that I'm going to kind of give you a run of a lot of things to maybe just have you just think twice about something. So, now that I've gone on and said all of that jazz, let's go on and state here that, again, there is no wrong answer in collecting a comic book. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. And so, firstly, the real way that I feel that a lot of people should try to go into a comic book is, in all honesty, try to narrow down what is to be your either favorite character or favorite team that you find the most visually appealing. And certain times it may go on and might be something as simple as the very first comic book cover that is to go on and catch your eye. Like, say, for example, if you are just to be a really big fan of Super Mario Brothers, and all of a sudden you're looking at a Deadpool comic book variant, and you're like, wow, that really strikes me as something very interesting. So I'm going to go on and check out specifically Deadpool number 11 out of a pretty decent run of Deadpool comic book. But I'm going to check out that one book specifically just because of this interesting Super Mario variant. That gets you started on a comic book collection. Hopefully, you'll go on and collect more than one that day. But hopefully, also, you'll go on and get comic books at a very much cheaper end, possibly going into a half price bookstore or a comic book store that has comic books for cheap. Certain times you may go on and find comic books or volume books or paperbacks or whatever at a Barnes and Noble or a bookstore, and really, like, those are to probably at a be much more higher price. You could probably go on and go online and be able to find everything that you could want, and most of the prices may be reasonable, um, but like may end up costing you still like a couple of bucks for every book that you're to go on and buy because of shipping and this and that. And that's sad, but that also is to be forcibly, it is what it is. uh I have just kind of been blessed with eventually finding certain comic book stores and stuff like that that I can go on and just kind of have a wide variety of just kind of choices, luckily, for me. But then also, I've gone on to certain places and just found nothing while going through them. or really just like the last time I was to go into a comic book store was like right around like free comic book day, and all I left was just the free comic books. I just couldn't find anything specifically that I liked that grabbed me when going into those places, and plus also a lot of the places were just busy anyways. um to the point where I did want to stand in line for maybe a book, because that's probably the only thing that I could possibly think that I could go on and find. And I think right at that time, I wasn't going on and doing as much research in comic books that I have done in the past week or so, of what's kind of really to be something that could tweak my fancy. But so, anyways, besides a comic book cover's visual appeal, you're just kind of thumbing through like the A's through the Z's, and you're just like, I don't know what I'm gonna go on and pick today, but hopefully there's just a comic book that just slaps me in the face. You can also go on and look for specific covers that are to just be interesting variants, that are to be stuff like this Uncanny Avengers number 25 variant that I had gone on and collected specifically because I'm like, oh my god, this looks like the Avengers movie poster. Like I gotta collect this comic book just specifically because of that. And I would go on like 3 out of the 4 of these books I actually do actually have, but I just kind of gone on and just kind of grabbed the thing up because I'm gonna go on and explain the whole Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie thing. I'm gonna talk about that here fairly soon. But so, and lastly, you can have uh, a Booster Gold book that actually is to kind of tie into something that I'm going to talk about in a little bit here. But uh, this Booster Gold story is a tie into a big event of DC's past called the Killing Joke. And if anything, that was the most reason why I wanted to go on and collect the Booster Gold stories, because I was like, oh my god, like they're having a character that is tied into the big events of DC. I don't give a rip about Booster Gold. And plus, also, like when I ever was to have seen him in like the Justice League stuff, it seemed that it was kind of forced to never care about this character. But like I wanted to get this kind of book because of how it seemed like an important thing for a non-important character. Uh, but hey, like that could be a reason why you can get into comic books, is maybe just for that. And then lastly, if you were to go on and just like a movie or show, more than likely at some point there is some kind of comic book to have been made of it, surprisingly. Random example. I had gone on and liked a character called the Creature from the Black Lagoon. Come to find out, when I was to go into a comic book store right around Free Comic Book Day, they're doing the Creature of the Black Lagoon comic books. I'm like, oh my god, really? Wow, like that is really fascinating. Like, I was, if anything, just kind of hesitant about whether or not to kind of collect those books or not, because I'm like, ugh, like, what is the story really gonna be about? Like, I don't know if it's gonna be something that's really gonna be something none other than just this milked out thing. And like it's not like I've heard anything like about this story, because if I would have, then I probably would have been like, "Oh my god, I need to pick this up." No, like I haven't heard jack crap nothing about anybody talking about it, sadly enough. So, so yeah, like if anything, it probably was to get me a little itchy about it, but like I just didn't pull the trigger. And then also, for those of you going into collecting possibly a story that is just about a film, a lot of times it's just kind of cover to cover, exactly like the movie or the show, and there's nothing new to read out of it. Like a lot of times, even these books may not even have much real value out of them. That's probably why you're probably seeing them in a books, like a thrift store or something like that, and they're kind of throwaway things, sadly enough. I think a lot of times people were giving me these kinds of books, and like when I would go on and I would start to thumb through them, I'm like, there's no story here because there doesn't need to be, because it's selling a movie or a show or whatever, and it's not really like needing to have any real value. Like there was a lot of times where there'd be a lot of um like movies that came out during a certain time, like the Punisher movie, the very first original one, had its own kind of comic book thing. And like when going through that book, I'm like, there's nothing here. There's not much of story here. And I just kind of like, okay, what was the point of this? I was just like, man, like I guess it's a cool just kind of collecting thing, but and I feel that at some point maybe I'll go on and show off my collection of just stuff that I've kind of accumulated over time. But I don't know how much real value I'm gonna have of any of that real stuff. But there's some interesting just titles in there at some point. Maybe, possibly. But anyways, um, if anything, if you're gonna go into stuff like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's probably better off to kind of go into the IDW collection. IDW has a lot of surprising, interesting, kind of pop culture like things like Ghostbusters or Star Trek, and could logically be for a mass number of people a way to continue on a certain series that they thought was long and dead. Um, like Smallville has a season 11 comic book. If you're Smallville fans, like, oh my god, wait, there's a whole comic book that's about this show that continues on the story. Wow, I should probably check that out. And so on and so forth. Surprisingly enough, there may be that thing for you at some point in your life. Uh, yeah, let's move on. Like I thought maybe there might have been another thing to talk about here. But anyways, homage comic book covers. So if I had gone on and just talked about the Booster Gold comic book cover there, that technically to me is a homage cover because it's to be covering the Killing Joke upon its cover book. All the more reason for me to want to collect that because that is to be tied to be similar to a more popular Batman title. Kind of like these books here. We go on and we have legitimately Deadpool, who is to be going back in time in his book to be tied into a Spider-Man story. And uh, that story was kind of really rather fun and interesting to see how Deadpool is going to play that whole thing out. And also, it is to be connected to a Spider-Man story that has some historical value. So, all the more reason for me to want to go on and collect every single one of the Amazing Fantasy 15 homage comic book covers, like these three that you kind of see here. I collected all three of those because it's like, oh yeah, man, like I don't care how horrible any number of these Spider-Man books are, or any of the stuff that are really to be inside the books. I just wanted to collect those specific covers to eventually have a whole huge collection of every single one of these kinds of covers. So eventually to sell them off as a big, huge, massive collection of things. As well as also looking at these homage covers doing the exact same thing with this. I don't know if I have like these kind of gold and silver looking ones, but I kind of go on and have like all three of the three top ones there, and I do have the Spawn one. And I do think that there's also just kind of other stuff that I had gone on and collected where people are going on and doing that same pose. So again, if people want to eventually want to just eventually have me just kind of shove out all every single comic book that I've ever had and just be like, hey, here's this and here's that and oh yeah. By all means, like it would just be kind of fun thing to go into. As well as also, if you're looking for a better understanding of the Marvel or DC characters, besides Google, you can go on and collect stuff like a Marvel encyclopedia, possibly the upgraded or extended version if there is to be a more updated one than that. This is the only one that I logically have. Or you can go on and collect the DC Comics Encyclopedia, the all new edition. Again, if you were to just want to be thumbed through that so much more quickly than going through a computer and having it be done that way, by all means. Uh, Plus, also, I just feel that it's way easier to just go through a book and find a lot of characters, and it's just really fun that way. I feel than going through and checking it all out through a computer. Or I just go on and I watch a lot of YouTubers that talk about certain comic books and I screenshot it. I'm like, okay, great. Like they talked about this series, I can go on and just kind of retroactively uh, find it myself and kind of read what's going on, or watch certain other YouTubers like Comics Explained, Comics Historian, Comic Drake, this and that, whatever have you, anybody talking about a comic book and kind of see what's going on throughout the whole story so I can kind of parrot it, or I can go on and uh, have a just a certain minute amount of knowledge of whatever uh, to eventually say, hey man, check this out. It's really interesting because this is what I know about it. So, homage comic book covers are really fun. I really like those. And it's also really just kind of a fun thing. Like uh, the Wolverine with the claws out, with the Hulk face on it, homage cover. Superman holding Supergirl as she died in one of the stories, homage cover. You kind of see those repeatedly everywhere, and eventually, if you kind of Google homage covers, you're going to see like a wide variety of different kinds at some point. Uh, but it kind of depends on kind of where you further and further click. But anyways, moving on. I'm hoping eventually you're going to go on and get to a very narrowing of like what you want to go on and find in your collection, because logically, if you've gone on and started to like figure out like, okay, like I've gone through and I've collected so and so title that has a team in it, and I found like just kind of these random books that like they're kind of iffy, but maybe I can just kind of find some kind of value in them. They look kind of interesting. I like this one character. And like example for me, like I found some interesting characters uh simply by going on and going through YouTube and just kind of seeing if anybody has like comic book origins or comic book histories of certain characters uh, throughout every single either DC, Marvel, Image, Independent, whatever thing. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I can find out about this certain specific character as much as I can, the most information I can. Or eventually, some people may go on and instead of actually collecting a comic book in hand, they can go on and just read digital comic books because maybe that's what you want to go on and do. But maybe not every single comic book is available in digital. I don't know. I don't go through that route. I'm an old fashioned guy. But anyways, but stuff that I've gone on and I've sought out interest in would be characters like Sleepwalker, and there was to be a character that I found was a woman named Flatline, and of course, like I said, kind of Ghost Rider is always interesting to me. As well as there also is really popular characters that I feel are always a safe bet. Uh, like you can more than likely find a really good book in Batman or Spider Man or the Hulk or uh, like it all just kind of depends on your personal preference. If you only like female characters, then really you're probably gonna have a really hard journey to you having to like find a narrowly specific good quality enough story for you to just hang on to. um Maybe you're just gonna have to go into just certain teams that just really have good female characters, like X-Men's um tend to have pretty good, I feel, female characters. uh more than likely, a Birds of Prey book might actually be really interesting, depending on what the roster is for that certain specific amount of time. Or logically, I feel a lot of people, and I'm kind of really giving away my hat here with kind of explaining all this stuff because there's somewhere down the line where I'm probably going to talk about team stuff. But anyways, um, but yeah, but I hope people are going to go on and find specific characters, as well as also just really liking certain teams. Because really, beyond you not liking the superhero genre at some point, and I'll get to that also, to give you a wider variety of different things that you can choose just beyond superhero genre. But yeah, like, uh, but definitely you can also come to find that a lot of even out of superhero stuff may go on and have individual books, like one-off things or mini series or whatever that aren't tied to the big book, which always happens. So that's where I'm kind of going with here. So, um, but if anything, I liked this certain character called Sleepwalker because it's just kind of an interesting idea where we have this kind of goofy looking alien looking character that ends up getting into a certain guy's body, and when that guy ends up falling asleep, the sleepwalker superhero character kind of takes over, and at some point further we have the sleepwalker character that ends up kind of dosing his alter ego with these sleeping pills, and going on and tricking this person into falling further and further asleep to eventually him going into a coma, and the sleepwalker kind of just taking over, and eventually like having the sleepwalker character uh, just becoming this more interesting presence. And regardless of how at some point this character is to probably be scarcely used and whatever, I thought it was rather interesting to just eventually want to like, I want to just check out this character just because it had an interesting just overall history or story when I was to check out the video of them. And then Flatline, like I had just heard about this character, and I think she's of course to have been a more newer character, so like there might not be a whole library on actually Flatline. Um, but from what I heard from her story, how like whenever she used to be around a dead person and they die, like she takes on all of their memories and like all of their abilities and this and that, and I'm just like, okay, wait a minute, what? Like this not only seems quasi like a almost kind of like a resurrection man kind of story, but also like this flatline character just visually looks very interesting to me specifically. So I was like, man, this character is really speaking to me as just something really interesting, and it also just kind of reminds me of the Kevin Bacon Flatliners movie that I recently had reviewed at some point. Um, but then again, Ghost Rider is always a go-to that I feel like characters like Deadpool and Ghost Rider to me are always just easily go-tos in the Marvel side of things. Um, DC, I think I have a much more kind of. It kind of depends on the day. Like I'd probably say that I'd probably want to go for Green Lantern stuff if over anything else. But a lot of times that's not available. A lot of times I end up forcibly having to kind of pick through Batman stuff because that seems to be the bigger seller more so than anything. Or I'm having to just kind of be forced to go through anything that could be DC related just to kind of find something in there that I'm just kind of forced to like, well, like I guess I'll look into this today. I'll look into a what if issue, huh? Let's see, or that's Marvel. DC like, oh, I'm gonna look into a an Elseworld thing that's to be just kind of a mini series that's just so I can get something different out of a character, just to just randomly check it out. But yeah, like I think uh at some points you're gonna go on if you're going into a comic book store, you probably end up getting forced to just be stuck with checking things out, um, rather than actually finding something that you're going to absolutely just be like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like I'll go on and I'll find random characters that I do fall in love with, like the original The Ray story that I really did like. Or I'll go on and I'll just find certain characters that are just so interesting, like Ragman from the DC world of things. Or I'll go on and eventually find other superhero characters that probably aren't in the Marvel and DC world of things, like the Crow, and just be like, oh wow, what is this about? But anyways, uh, we'll go on and we'll get into other things here. So now the independent side of things. So there, of course, is to be the go-to characters that more than likely have been adapted into a number of different shows. You will have, of course, The Boys, Invincible, Sin City that had been adapted into movies, Preacher that had been a show, Spawn, of course, that is to have been a not only movie, but then also a HBO series that is to possibly go on and maybe have another movie somewhere down the gate. Hellboy, that is to be a consistent reboot for the most point. The Walking Dead, that of course had just been a very long stretch of a show, so much so that eventually people just lost all interest. And even when there are to still be certain new content, like, yeah, really. But, anyways, if I hadn't said it already, when I was to go on and when I was to, I think in the very early stages of that show, like look into like the first volume of The Walking Dead or a number one for The Walking Dead, oh my god, were those books freaking pricey. I did not want to pay hundreds of dollars for a volume one of The Walking Dead, or hundreds, of, maybe $1,000 plus, maybe I don't know, of the very first Walking Dead. I don't know if I ever got a number one of The Walking Dead. It might have been some reprint or something, uh, but I may have gotten one, but I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. Uh, or I might have gotten like a volume book. Uh, that might have been a more likely a thing that I did, just so that way I can get something that has some connection with that. When of course I was to just enjoy The Walking Dead. But yeah, but I'm going to be talking more than just this about independent books. I'm going to be talking because these are all kind of somewhat into the superhero genre of things. But let's go on and let's kind of get beyond that. So, uh, we have, of course, in the horror genre of things, we have a lot of interesting choices. Uh, the things that I would have actually liked to have added on here would be like Fanboys versus Zombies, because I feel like that's just kind of an interesting book. Maybe not the best story wise, but like a zombie apocalypse that takes place in a Comic-Con just really just is to be like an amazing idea to me, regardless of how it actually plays out with the whole hot dog thing. But there's also stuff that I found out like hack and slash or hack slash slash, um, that I was like, oh my god, like this is a really interesting supernatural book that eventually ties in certain characters like Ash from The Evil Dead or the Reanimator movie character or Chucky. Um, and is to have just kind of these interesting ideas and interesting concepts as well as these just kind of two interesting characters, and it's much more of a much more of an adult, darker, grittier story. Which I'm like, all right, cool. Like this, to a lot of people, could probably be compared to that whole supernatural show. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like something to eventually check out at some point. Um, Berserker, of course, is to be a Keanu Reeves story that uh, really I was to go on and when I was to hear the story, how it plays out, I was like, okay, like to me, this kind of sounds kind of like um, the Valiant character Bloodshot in a way, but also like when I was to just kind of check into Berserker, I'm like, man, this story actually really is really good. Like it kind of reminds me of a lot of like just kind of Wolverine stories, and like I was like, okay, like this is kind of a different kind of story, different kind of take, and I could probably enjoy something of a Berserker kind of story. So uh, definitely would go on and recommend that as well. Uh, for those of you who may go on and actually be old show fans, besides you going on and maybe liking a Ghostbusters or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, maybe you are to go on and also like Power Rangers and not even realize that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers had did a story called Shattered Grid, a big huge event where Tommy ends up coming to uh, not only be the Green Ranger, but then also is to have a Ranger that has always stayed evil and is coming to another world to try and defeat it. Very good, this Shattered Grid story. Really went on and enjoyed it. And if you were to be a person that just really just liked Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and that's it, this could logically just be a story for you. And I thought that it was freaking awesome. So if you've never heard of Shattered Grid, uh, go on and possibly, hopefully, catch the early runs of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and then just kind of go into the Shattered Grid thing, or check out a lot of the actual videos that anybody would go on and talk about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and just kind of figure out if that story is actually for you. Because there's also there's a many different varieties of Power Ranger books. There's like Go Go Power Rangers, and like, there's a lot of stuff. There's a combo platter of just different kinds of Power Rangers books out there. And so also there's these two other books. Volt. Volt is a company that seems to be doing a lot of horror books, which the more and more that I find out about what Vault is doing, I'm like, oh my god, like this company is just really surprising me by what it's doing. Like the kind of the concepts alone are just really interesting. Like this comic book that, of course, is to be on here is called The Nasty. So this is to be a story about a kid that has a imaginary friend who's to be just kind of this horror looking character. But then we go on and we have a whole story about these people needing to go on and try to like sell people on these VHS rentals. Like this is a very old fashioned story, and so we come to find that these people are to want to come up with this just kind of certain like nasty movie that anybody is to just be buzzing to have heard about and want to see what it's all about, like making us realize that, of course, like people finding out that, oh my god, a movie is rated R, oh my god, I need to check this out because it's going to be vastly different than any of the other PG-13 stuff that's coming out this year or whatever. um all the more reason for that person to want to just specifically want to check that rated R movie out rather than any of the other uh kinds of movies. So we're having these characters that all want to go on and check out this unique film, and it ends up turning around and biting them in the big one with this imaginary friend that goes on and wipes them all out, that kills them all off. So we're like, okay, like why is it now that this imaginary monster can be seen by these people at this specific time, and so on and so on. So yeah, like it just becomes like this really interesting story where I want to see how it all gets played out. And the Nasty is just a really interesting concept that I was like, oh my god, I cannot not check out this story. And then also, I think Image has a story called The Dark Ride. Basically, you're going into like a Disney World like story where you're having this demonic presence taking over this amusement park, and it kind of becomes to where this owner is to eventually leave this park off to his next of kin, and it just becomes a really interesting, wildly different kind of story, which I was to go on and just kind of be fascinated by. And I feel like there's also a number of other books that I can go on and just kind of toss on the fire here, uh, that I had gone on and heard about through people like Comic Tropes, and he has gone on and made a whole list of just kind of horror stories in one video that I'm like, oh my god, like every single one of these just sound really fascinating to me. And I would also just kind of go on and just find all these random like things that I would just kind of find through just kind of looking up all of this stuff and just be like, oh my god, like this speaks to me. Like this is to be just an interesting book that is just something other than the run of the mill of being something more than just a superhero book, and I like that for it. Um, but yeah, so definitely check possibly these books out. But also, there's stuff like um, Where the Monsters Lie, which we have like a whole like monster group that is to just kind of be all at this kind of retirement home, and hearing that concept alone is just like, okay, like how is that all going to play out? Um, and also kind of hearing about the uh like something is killing the children, the whole story about the people wearing the bandanas and they're facing off against monsters, and like there's just a lot of interesting horror books that I've ever heard of in my life, and I'm like, why haven't I been hearing about these books? Why does it seem that there's not like a person that is going on and being the person that is to go on and talk about all these books beyond just the superhero stuff? Is no one else giving a rip about any of these things beyond just the superhero books? Is that what's going on? Is that the big problem? Um, or maybe I'm just not finding the niche enough of a person that I can go in specifically just for this certain need that I have. But anyways, so after you've gone on and looked through either the superheroes or the independent stuff, now it all comes down to what team you are to go on and like the most. And I've already kind of talked about certain teams like Birds of Preys and this and that, whatever have you. So on the Marvel side, you can probably go on and just look into Avengers, and that'll take up probably just a lot of your time. There's many different kind of flavors or rotations of Avengers, and there's also to be like so many different variations of the Avengers team that it'll take you forever to just look through that. X-Men eventually consistently changes its roster from issues to issues, and so whoa. And so eventually, what's going on here? Uh, so yeah, so eventually you can go on and uh, maybe I was stepping on something. Uh, and you can go on and find a different kind of variety of X Men at some point. Uh, but yeah, but there's even Dark Avengers. Dark Avengers is kind of like a bunch of evil people that are to go on and become Avengers. Uh, and you have like Norman Osborn that has kind of taken over Stark Tech, and he turns on and is like, okay, like I want to start picking my Avengers, and he goes on and he picks Venom, and he says like, okay, Venom, like you're gonna be my Spider-Man, and so like Venom changes his costume, and then Norman Osborn goes into like choosing Ares and all these other characters, and eventually we come to find that Norman Osborn is actually turned back into the Green Goblin by the end of that story. But if anything, there's just kind of really interesting things going on, I feel, in that story. And then also there is Doctor Strange's Damnation that eventually you'll find out about the actual Midnight Suns. And actually, if you were to go on and find any number of supernatural team like stuff, it's actually really cool. And eventually I'll go on and I'll talk about on that on the DC side of things. But yeah, Midnight Suns I feel has really fun and interesting stories, and usually has a rotation of just kind of different kind of characters, and stories are always just really fun. And I really liked Doctor Strange's Damnation. That was one of the kind of the standout of more recent books that have kind of come out lately. Um, and then also there's to be Champions. Champions, I feel like took me forever to find out that this team even freaking existed, and they've been out for forever. It seemed that at the very first start of it, there was like Hercules as a leader, and then eventually there is to now be kind of never changing roster of brand new people, whatever that they just can't find a book for anywhere else. They just kind of throw into the Champions team, like Novas and Brawn and like I think Cyclops at some point is to be involved in the Champions. Uh, but yeah, like whoever they can just kind of toss in that team for this week is to be whoever that they find. Miles Morales sadly never really finds himself being on a really good team, so he's probably just kind of tossed on whatever. Or he ends up having to be changed into being the Falcon or some other goofy thing for some whatever reason that makes no goddamn sense. Uh, but the Champions I feel is a team that maybe just be really interesting, but uh, for the life of me, I probably out of all the things I've had to go on and choose, the Champions was never the very first run out of the gate kind of thing to go into. Uh, Other than that, I think probably on the Marvel side of things, not quite sure if there's any other teams that would probably throw into the mix here, but I'm sure there probably is a number of them because there really always is. Let me know in the comments below your favorite Marvel team that I probably completely forgot about, because I'm sure there probably is. Because if you were to be an X Force or an X Factor or some kind of mutant team that I've probably forgotten about, maybe you're a Brotherhood of Mutants or whatever. I didn't really cover much of the villain side of things, but anyways, it is what it is. Like, very rarely can you ever get like a villain story. I wish they can go on and do a lot more of that. Like, occasionally you'll get like a Carnage book or you'll get like a Venom book, but a lot of times it's all focusing about the hero. So if you don't get a lot of villain side of things, unless it's a Harley Quinn or a Joker or whatever, um, like level character, it's like a Doctor Doom where you could probably sell him individually on his own books, just because he's that well to do of a character. That Doctor Doom could probably be playing the fence where he could be a villain on one issue and a good guy in another. But anyways, on the DC side of things, there have been so many different kind of flavors of the Justice League team. We have like Justice League, Justice Society, uh, Justice League of America. Uh, More than likely, if there's the word justice in it, there's probably a team with it too. Young Justice. There's a lot of different kind of Justice League teams out there. So you can go on and find so many different kinds of Justice Leagues. You could find uh I think there's like a Justice League Earth 2, or there's some kind of story that deals with Earth 2 where there is a like African American Superman, and there's the Alan Scott Green Lantern, and just kind of a variety of different kind of flavors for folks when it comes on to the Justice League. But then, of course, we have Teen Titans, who, of course, would go on and at some points have a number of its characters being rotationed in, and also having these same kind of characters go into other teams. That I'm like, okay, what's the difference between like Teen Titans and like Young Justice or The Outsiders, or this and that and whatever have you? Like, sometimes there are certain characters that are kind of playing in a number of different kind of teams, and like we start to eventually kind of have certain things just kind of lose their way or value or whatever. Or eventually we'll go on and have Teen Titans eventually be changing its name to Titans or some other kind of goofy, weird thing. It just, whatever they just want to go on and do just to kind of fit whatever narrative that they have. Like, I don't know, like, uh, logically, Teen Titans, it seems to be very top tier characters to where it seems if you go onto every top 50 list, you're going to find probably the whole entire Teen Titans somewhere in a top 50 list. So probably logically, I would definitely have people check out Teen Titans because it seems that these characters are really popular. I don't know why, but they are. Hence why you have shows like Titans to have existed for a number of seasons, Young Justice to have lasted as long as it did, and eventually Teen Titans would go on to do Teen Titans Go, which I never really sat down and really want to watch Teen Titans Go because Teen Titans existed. I don't think Teen Titans Go is all that great, and it's also uh, on a lot of its episodes just kind of phoning things in and trying wildly different things because it doesn't care what it needs to do anymore. It just needs to continue to exist and milk its existence for all it's worth. So, sadly, but honestly enough. Um, Justice League Dark. Regardless of the stories that are within Justice League Dark, I like this team. I really do. It was a great idea that finally New 52 decided to put this team together. I'm like, oh my god, a whole entire team of Justice League characters of supernatural beings. Oh my god, like, why haven't they thought of this before? Because half the time, like, any number of these characters individually would be such a rough sell. But now you have a whole entire team that I can go on and just be like, yeah, heck yeah, I want these characters to not only like get really good stories with them because normally they don't, but I really want them to do something with this team, regardless of uh, what other books are legitimately selling. Uh, but anyways, I liked the fact that they also started to do some animated stuff with them. Yeah, at some point they kind of gave up the quality of those projects, but still, I was to really just be happy that they were doing a Justice League Dark. There's never probably going to be a live action movie of Justice League Dark, but hey, like, maybe at some point there might be a show. That'd be nice. And then Green Lantern Corps. This is to be a picture that is tied to the much more modern crap. And no, 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 no. No, 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 no. Not with my Green Lantern Corps. No, no, no. So, uh, in honesty, when Jeff Johns was really taking the reins with Green Lantern, that's when I think people should honestly be reading anything to do with Green Lantern. Because you were getting on with the Blackest Nights and the Brightest Days, and you're getting these massive events that was consistently just banging after banging after banging. And Green Lanterns, I think, so much in the past were to be so much more higher as far as focuses to go and had so many good stories. And we're having to so much more hang on to those older stories than whatever new crap is going on with Sinestro being a leader of the Red Lanterns, which I'm like, what happened to Atrocitus? What happened to Guy Gardner being a Red Lantern? Why is this stuff going the way it is? I'm so confused. What the heck is going on? But yeah, like, really, there is at some points a lot of jumping off points that I also do with Green Lantern stuff. Because really, there are, I think, certain kind of issues that are better than others. And really, like, I have so many Green Lantern books and stories and whatever that, like, really, I probably can't retain all of it of what all happened and everything. But uh, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of good Green Lantern books. Like the Justice League, or Justice League. What am I saying here? Let me kind of a little bit. There is a book called Green Lantern Rebirth, and it was way before Rebirth for the DC was even a thing. That story with Hal Jordan becoming the Spectre is one of the key issues that if you haven't read it, you need to. If you are not a Green Lantern fan whatsoever, you need to pick up that book because actually it's really good. And as well as we also have the Spectre in that story, which is just an amazing character that randomly every once in a while gets used, but doesn't go on and get used enough to my freaking liking. Like, oh my god, how you go on and you have dropped the ball so much on that goddamn character, it ticks me off to no goddamn end. This character should honestly have his own solo book forever, and then also should have really had a show or a movie or a something by freaking now because god dang that character is just so interesting. Like this character is basically the Crow and no movie no show. What the like you have massively just dismanaged and you have ruined this Spectre character, I feel, in my eyes. You for not giving the Spectre what he freaking deserves. But whatever, you can just keep having him in every single one of these animated shows and comic books. Just whatever you want to. Just remember he even exists. You can put him in these big key roles and these big key episodes. Yeah, that's the moaning and groaning of me of the frickin' Spectre that I feel is not getting his just frickin' desserts. But anyways, Green Lanterns. Or you could go on and like all different kinds of light spectrums. Maybe you can like the Red Lanterns or the Indigos or the Blues, the Blue Lanterns, their Hope, and the Red Lanterns are Rage, and the Green Lanterns are Will, and this and that. There's just kind of a very cluster of characters you can go on and enjoy that are to be involved in specific teams. So check them out. And then we have the big crisis events that are going on with either DC or Marvels. And at some points, I can go on and even state that if you were to be a seemingly brand new fan, you could probably go on and actually just jump into a number of these certain crisis events or big events and become a fan out of that and just go on and want to uh, check out these books. Like there's some ones where it kind of wanes whether they're really a crisis event or not, but I don't really care. I just added them in here anyways because I wanted to. Because I feel like Injustice Gods Among Us is technically like a big event going on with these characters, which eventually leads to deaths and like this whole big build to a thing that is probably not to have a really good payout because heaven forbid I went on and read every single one of those books because eventually I just stopped reading because I was like, man, like these books are just stretching out like a mother. But god dang, there's so many interesting things going on. How they're going on and using Batman to bring in all of these characters to just face off against Superman to probably consistently lose. It's just so cool. Like how there's just this just fight between these two groups and it just may end up going nowhere. But still, it's so interesting. Um More than likely out of probably most of these events, I probably would not have a brand new reader go into something like Flashpoint. With Flashpoint, there's just a lot of stuff that is going on in there that would not make sense if you were to like, okay, I'm gonna just start reading Flashpoint and then go into any other book. It won't make sense to you because you're gonna go on and be like, okay, wait a minute, in Flashpoint, like their Batman is Thomas Wayne, but if I go into any other book, it seems that the Batman is Bruce Wayne. What is going on here? Yeah, a lot of Flashpoint doesn't make sense for a brand new reader. You would have to go on and realize that Flashpoint has a lot of just like alternate things going on in every single one of the characters' storylines that you've ever gone on and known in the past. If again, Flashpoint is not something to just jump into if you're a brand new reader. You have to go on and do some legwork before going to Flashpoint. And even in like stuff like the Flashpoint movie, I'm like, what the heck is even going on with this film? and I even know or knew who a lot of those characters were from watching all the films. And I'm like, still, like, I have no idea what's going on in this film. But anyways, there's a lot of crises, whatever. Forever Evil. I started reading this book, but quickly gave up. I read number one because I'm like, oh my god, you have a villain story where a bunch of villains are all just banging together. I'm like, yeah, like it didn't play out how I wanted it to play out, so I was just like, nah, I don't really care. Uh, the Watchmen, I think, if you haven't seen the movies, then more than likely you're probably going to enjoy the books. But if you've already kind of seen the movie, then like the movie basically are the books. Like how much they rinse and repeat just that movie over and over and over and over again. I'm just like, man, if they can go on and give me any kind of other Watchmen kind of content, which at some points they had gone on and done shows about that, but still. Um, but anyways, yeah. So a lot of these other crises, you're gonna find alternate Earths, where you're gonna find other kinds of Batman or Superman, and they're gonna be called different things and have completely different names and this and that, and they're going to be probably called like Ultraman or Owlman or Superior Woman or whatever. There's going to be a barrage of just kind of different characters all thrown out to you for just that one story and maybe not anything else. And you're just going to be baffled and confused. And so logically, there may not be every single crisis event that you'll go on and you'll really understand, but maybe you'll just want to go on and read anyways, just because you get a bunch of characters that you wouldn't be able to go on and see in one thing otherwise. So all the more reason for you to maybe check out a crisis event for DC. DC's was just be a zombie book, which was like, okay, this is cool. Like, I like what story is going on here. Um, Eventually, like, we have Batman who ends up putting on like the Mr. Freeze helmet, and he kind of tries to delay him turning into a zombie, which is really kind of cool. As well as also, we're kind of slowly seeing like the big heavy hitters eventually like realizing that they're at some point going to be turning into zombies. So like they're turning around to their like next of kins and just being like, oh hey, like I'm gonna give you this super suit and whatever, and like you're gonna be the next Batman or whoever. And like there's a lot of send offs to a lot of characters, and there's like a really good interesting just play out of things, and I really enjoyed the kind of the quick pace of Deceased. But then also eventually Rebirth had that whole like Dark Knight's Metal thing. I think that's where they lost me in Rebirth. There are certain interesting titles in Rebirth, like of course Batman. I think Superman actually had a good story in there. Harley Quinn in the very beginning of her Rebirth story, like was actually had some fun things going on with the whole zombie angle and her having that red Tool sidekick character, kind of really having us forced to be realizing that Harley Quinn straight up ripped off a lot of things that were going on with Deadpool's books and just used it in her books because they had probably no idea what to write for her, so they just blatantly ripped off Deadpool. And then really like the only real like stuff that I knew was actually popular was a lot of stuff from New 52. And then anything beyond anything earlier than that, like you would just have to just go on and just kind of sift through yourself to really just find out like what your real true interest is in, instead of just going on and just like, yeah, I should probably just collect like a Superman story because Superman is probably like really popular, right? Like, yeah, go ahead, and you're probably just gonna get bored. Unless you really like Superman, then by all means, just I don't know, like really in the very early stages, you're gonna have to try a lot of books that you probably aren't going to like, or probably are gonna find like, oh my god, this is a book I like. I do not like Superman at all. I would go on and choose Superboy over Superman any day. The only Superman story I liked was Injustice: God Among Us. I didn't like anything else. Uh, like, yeah, I can go on and tell you that, like, the Superman Rebirth story was good, but, like, really, when looking at it, that's from years of nobody giving a rip about Superman whatsoever, not wanting at all to really talk about any Superman story. And the only real focus, I think, now is the relationship between both Superman and Jonathan Kent, and who knows how long that's really going to last in the modern books. I thought it was just kind of silly how they had Jonathan Kent wanting to put together his own Justice League. How long did that last? Not very long. They had to straight up kill off the entire Justice League just to bring them all freaking back to eventually do away with Jonathan Kent's Justice League. Man, what a crappy decision that was. But anything, let's move on because I don't want to talk about all the crises and whatever of the DC things. Um, really, for the Marvel side. So, Marvel, if you go on and you probably look at Spider Man or you look at X Men, it seems that those two uh, kind of titles usually probably have the most crisis events or big events. I would say because Spider-Man usually tends to like have I feel like a good uh, kind of big event to go into, like the original Spider-Verse, where you see a plethora of different kinds of Spider-Man, and then you can kind of pick and choose which one is to be your favorite and go into their specific books and just be like, oh yeah, I like Miles Morales, or I like this Ghost Spider, or oh, I like how this Spider-Man is wearing a bag over his head and he has a Fantastic Four costume. What is that about? And you go on, you find those specific books, and you're just like, oh wow, like I got a really good payoff from checking out this one Spider Verse book, or you would come to find stuff like X-Men Days of Future Past that is not only to be eventually a homage comic book cover. A lot of people would go on and kind of copy and paste the whole uh, Days of Future Past book, but then eventually it seems that X-Men, if nothing else, is to consistently figure out some way to try and re-reference Days of Future Past in his books. Every single time there is to be some kind of Days of Future Past thing going on with those stories to just kind of rinse and repeat that out. And then eventually we'd have these kind of bigger events like Civil War that battles between uh, like the teams. It becomes down the whole Superior Registration Act. Secret Invasion becomes a skull battle between the skulls and the superheroes, who's to go on and who's to be actual skull and who's to actually be the real person. Ooh, it's a whole mystery. Infinity Gauntlet ends up coming down to Thanos. Basically, if you've seen a lot of the Marvel films, really it's a clear cut, easy, same kind of film in whatever comparison. Secret Wars is probably going to be the big film, so probably everybody should go on and collect those books as soon as you can, because otherwise they're going to be really pricey. The original Avengers versus X-Men story, I feel, was actually really good. I like how they try to continue to build that up, but it also eventually further and further became like how just Injustice Got Among Us became, where it seemed that like no matter what on the X-Men side they were trying to throw uh, at one or the other, like it just kind of became this like losing battle of like Phoenix getting to be the Phoenix Force, and eventually having people need to go on and figure out how they can become more powerful, or like Scarlet Witch going off the way she does, and this and that, and and having it all kind of focusing on her, and also characters like Hope Summers and this and that. Yeah, and then also we get all these other kind of big events that I don't know as much about, so I kind of want to leave it there. Absolute Carnage is a really good story that is to be very similar to the Spider-Man 2 video game. So if you've seen that, check that out. Um, World War Hulk technically does have like an animated movie that is to be fairly similar. That I think is called like Planet Hulk or something like that. So if you don't want to go on and read a book, you can watch an animated movie about it and get the same exact story. Moving on. A lot of these things have some kind of uh movie with it, so like it's very hard to like go on and see all these big stories when probably somebody's probably heard all of these stories in the past. Let me pause here for a second. All right, so in summary and wrapping up, there are of course some easy go-to characters that can probably, of course, if I haven't said already, um really go on and also recommend to you. Like there of course would be Batman, that is to always be the go-to character because it's to more than likely be always the character that is to be the best seller. And when you are to probably always go on and go into a certain specific run of Batman, the early books are always to be the heavily most priced. Specifically when I was to have gone on and when I was in like the early stages of DC New 52, and I was like, okay, hey, I want to go on and finally start to collect like Batman. Like, man, like the Batman books were so pricey so early. So I'm like, God dang, like I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on a Batman story. No way. Like, if anything, I think I had to go on and find like the third or fourth or whatever variant, whatever goofy printing of a Batman thing. But even then, I don't think I know that I collected any of the Batman New 52 stuff because I was like, ugh. I might have, because I do think I remember starting to read it, and I was just like, okay, like this is a lot about like uh, what Gotham is and this and that, and it just became a whole goofy thing that every single one of the books had to have some weird monologue in the very beginning, very single one of the issues. And I was like, why is this to be a thing? It just sounded so kind of goofy at the time, but also was kind of interesting. I don't know, but the Last Night on Earth, I believe, is a story going on right now with Batman where he's supposedly crazy or he's not crazy. We don't know. He's basically Moon Knight because there is no unique ideas going on in comic books right now. And if there are, then I would be just shocked and surprised that they exist. But again, all the more reason for me to want to go on and collect the old fashioned stuff because really, at the end of the day, I can be able to learn about so many other characters in and learn about uh, things that I didn't know before rather than going on and getting into a modern book that is just to have repeated and echoed everything that has happened in the past anyways. So um but then also you can have stories like the Immortal Hulk that everybody is to just be jonesed about. Everybody loved this story, as well as it also had gone on to beat out Batman in comic book sales, and that had been a historical thing that Immortal Hulk had gone on to do because no other book had gone on to since then in a while have done that. So, and that had happened right after Avengers Endgame had been a thing. So, like during those early Marvel books, those books were really going on and really having a huge effect on comic books. Now, like either way, it doesn't matter. You can't go on and see the Marvels with Captain Marvel and think that, oh my god, like the Captain Marvel books are just gonna be skyrocketing because of that book and that movie existing. No, at the same time, it doesn't work that way right now. A lot of these characters that are going on in the films, nobody gives a about their books. Those things are going to increase in value because of some movie existing right now. It's not going to happen. Uh, you're lucky, if anything, if there's going to be some effect on Daredevil things because of a new show coming out. But even then, it's very iffy right now. But also, lastly, I'm going to go on and talk about a story called Snapshot. So, I had collected this story because it's just kind of interesting how it's just kind of a very different kind of book than I've seen. Uh, when it comes down to it being so much different than anything that I've seen in the superhero genre, getting way out of that, and just all these kind of other stories. I was kind of looking for something really different, so I found Snapshot. So this was a story about a person who had gone on and found this cell phone, and like it kind of ends up kind of echoing like the Will Smith movie, like Enemy of the State or whatever. But it becomes like a whole story about somebody wanting to go on and regain that cell phone, and they're going to go on and kill whoever is to go on and have that cell phone or have any information about that cell phone. They were going to kill that person. So like it becomes this really interesting uh just kind of story, and it also kind of reminded me of the one show called Utopia that is about a comic book where eventually the whoever is to be the beholder of the comic book is to have a bunch of people come after them and kill them off. And like and John Cusack was in the American version of Utopia, but then there's also the British version of Utopia. But yeah, we'll definitely go on and probably have people check out that Utopia show. Uh, really, I think I had gone on and I think I reviewed most of it. I'm not quite sure, or I gave up at some point because logically that probably more than likely happened. Uh, but anyways, uh, with me also saying now that I think it's about time to wrap this up. If I have not gone on and figured out a way to figure out a thing for you to just pick out with comic books, I'm sorry. But then also, I feel that you need to go on and also explore a lot more. People need to go on and really get out of their comfort zone when it comes down to comics. Yeah, get out of their comfort zone, not saying like, oh, you need to spend more. No, I'm just saying that you just need to like step away for like 1 week from your normal grab bag of stuff and like decide to like, okay, like I'm going to spend the normal money that I would spend on my usual comic books and find some cheap books and thumb through them and like start to find certain characters and titles and really maybe find stuff even like Howard the Duck and just have like a fun time reading something that I probably would not have, and see if you like it. See if you can think about wanting to go on and collect it. Like there's a lot of stuff that I'm kind of seeing that is actually to be fairly popular. I'm like, why that book? Like I'm looking at a lot of people who are all talking about Mr. Miracle right now. I'm like, why is that book popular? Why is all of a sudden Power Pack popular? Why am I seeing um like a lot of people going on and talking about a company called Volt right now in their horror books? Why am I seeing a lot of this right now? Why am I seeing a lot of these things that I'm not really seeing from a lot of other main um, comic book characters, which I'm really loving, and so on and so forth. I'm getting to be able to see like a larger variety of different comic books that yeah maybe they're not good, but really within my neighborhood of really seeing that these are going to be the things that I'm going to like the most, and I hope that you will at some point too. So with that said, I'm gonna get out here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.